I'm Casey McGuire. I currently teach at the University of West Georgia and live in Carrollton, Georgia. I got my Bachelor of Fine Arts degree at Alfred University in Western New York, and I have my master's degree from the University of Colorado Boulder. And I teach sculpture and work and live in Carrollton. In Insatiable, Feeling of Soft Ground, which is the installation here at UICA in Grand Rapids, the theme was discussing dead birds, houses, and domestic homes, and the loss of them. So sad houses that have been vacated by families, but new houses. We're not talking old, decrepit, dilapidated houses, but brand new suburban homes that families have had to leave, or I've had to leave, moving constantly and having your little house structure in a van. I just moved across country recently, so that had a lot of stimulation behind the work behind me. And my dad's a taxidermist, so I grew up with a lot of dead animals, a lot of fur, skulls, skeletons, playing with those sort of things in my lifestyle. And I use shadow and light a lot as a presence for some other element, some sort of metaphysical other that's around the space, and the birds' shadows hanging on the walls are really important to me, and that your, as the viewer, shadow is interacting with them. There's fur at the bottom of each of the houses, and the fur is taken from my father's studio. They're deer and caribou hides. The caribou on one of the houses is actually 80 years old and was given by a family whose father had passed away and collected all of these taxidermied items and stuff, and that got passed on to me. And those materials are really important because I think my foundation was growing up with a taxidermist, and the foundation of Grand Rapids was built on the fur trade. So there was this huge connection between those two, and when I saw the space, that was important for me to highlight. And the materials, the paper, I think are really nice because they really elaborate on shadow. Paper is this two-dimensional item that I can really push its qualities and make this huge, vastly three-dimensional space come alive with shadow. So that was another important part. And then the houses are all quarter-inch plywood, and they kind of glow and they're warm, and plywood's a really common, very accessible material. And I didn't want them to necessarily look like a house. Like, you don't make houses out of plywood externally. So there's this sort of dynamic going on between the material shift, but all houses are made out of plywood. So why we don't see that plywood all the time, it's really common in a household material. I'm really inspired by my family's dynamic. So my grandmother was a rockette, and she objectified herself and used her body and was a performer. And she was one of the original rockettes for Radio City Music Hall. And my father was he really talks about her in a very negative way, and that he was really against this. And so he moved to the country, and now he makes realistic, very highly defined, highly beautiful models of animals, and really looking at this parallel between those two in use of body, use of life, use of death, and use of being preserved, and how I can sort of have this perfectly preserved space in an installation. And that's really inspiring to me. And also thinking about beauty and what is this term beauty, and how does the real and the perfect and the pristine, and my grandmother had to be a specific height and weight for all the years she was a rockette. That was before they sort of had a height differentiation. They were all the same height, same leg, same inseam. And I think that's just really interesting to think about how my father makes deer look exactly the same, look exactly pristine, and how I can sort of recreate a domestic environment, recreate a house, but have them be tweaked, have them be off, so that my viewer comes in and has a connection with house and home and the domestic, but at the same time is removed. It's a different sort of variable than a real, perfect, pristine house. So I'm really inspired by that in my life, but I'm also inspired by a lot of artists who work with large architectural shifts. Currently, there's a Michelle O'Donnell show here in Grand Rapids at the Sculpture Gardens, and I'm really inspired by her work that she does with large grain mills that she takes from the Michigan landscape. So I think one of the things I did well as an artist, as a student of art, and before I knew I wanted to be a student of art, was I had my hands in everything. So I was working in a library that was specifically an art reference library. I was assisting with installs with gallery artists who had come into town. I was really pushing myself to play with every single medium I could to figure out what I really would be inspired by, and at the same time acquire every skill I could. And I think in hindsight now I realize that having all these skills is what's really made things like this possible. You know, I can cut paper, I can hang line, I can build houses, I can use saws. I'm not scared to weld, I'm not scared to use machinery that I probably wouldn't have been had I not just sort of tried everything. And to really immerse myself in any possibility and know that I didn't pigeonhole myself. And I think that's really important for students. Don't pigeonhole yourself and say, I'm going to be a photographer. That's going to limit you for everything for the rest of your life. So really by pushing yourself to go, well, maybe I am, maybe I'm not, maybe I'm this, maybe I'm that, and really try everything.